My Lords, it's a great pleasure to take part in this International Women's Day debate, and I welcome the Noble Lady the Minister to her new role. And I should perhaps declare an interest, since I contributed several chapters to the two-volume series, The Honourable Ladies, short biographies of all the women MPs up to 1996 that she edited with Ian Dale. Now, this is my fourth International Women's Day speech to your Lordship's House. In previous ones, I have uncovered buried, silenced voices of women from the past. And I was terribly tempted to do that this time. For women in science, there are myriad possibilities. From Aghanese, an Egyptian princess during the Middle Kingdom who worked on astronomy and natural history, through to the 17th century scientific illustrators Giovanni Gazzoni and Maria Sibylla Miriam, particular favourites of mine, both of whom, atypically for their time and centuries hence, treated insects as independent actors and agents, rather than stiff, dead subjects to be pinned for the human gaze. It's possible to draw a direct line of ecological thinking by women from them to Susan Simard, the discoverer of what has been dubbed the worldwide wood, of the interrelationships of various species within woodland environments. But I could not focus on history today, not in the world of 2025. So instead, my speech will be, if I may humbly say so, a companion to that of the Noble Lady Baroness Lane Fox of Soho. For the official theme of this International Women's Day is Accelerate Action. But rather than that, I think we need to do, as the Noble Lady said, to feel the perilous nature of the moment. To put it in one verb, I would say our theme should be resist. For what we are seeing is a dual and interconnected attack on women and on science by the leaders of the world's most powerful state. The United States of America, that was, according to the American Association for the Advancement of Science, responsible for 32% of global science and research funding in 2021. What we are seeing, and it's not like we weren't warned, for the destructive ideology of the Trump administration was constructed in plain sight in the form of Project 2050. I go to a local women's voice to explain what is now being implemented in Washington. This is from the US National Women's Law Center. This project, I quote, seeks to impose a hierarchical, gendered, patriarchal vision of society focused on enforcing a vision of the family that relies on fixed and narrowly defined gender roles and in undermining protections that enable women and LGBTIQA+ people to thrive outside of a male-dominated heterosexual family. It also seeks to reinforce racial hierarchy. Close quotes. And we have to note that this is a world envisaged without democracy. If noble members have not read The Sovereign Individual, republished in 2020 with a preface from Peter Thiel, co-founder of the tech company Palantir, a name I recognise particularly from my time in the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme due to its pervasive presence across our military, I would urge them to. For the book claims that the information revolution will bring about the death of politics, for which might be read the death of human rights, the rule of law, and what so many women and men have fought for over decades and centuries. That attack on women and girls, a desire to restrict their human potential, is all too evidently part of a broader attack on science. I note an article in the journal Science Today that the US National Institutes of Health has begun mass terminations of research grants that fund active scientific projects. The aim is to cancel grants in any way related to gender identity, diversity, equity and inclusion in the scientific workforce, environmental justice, and anything related to climate change. All to be cancelled, ongoing projects. Now, I want to finish with some questions to the Noble Lady, the Minister. For, of course, we have, sitting in this chamber, limited influence on what happens in the United States. Perhaps no real influence at all, as it increasingly aligns itself with Russia rather than its traditional allies. But this government has a responsibility for what happens here in the UK. So I note that on Blue Sky today there was an advert from a French university seeking applicants for a Safe Place for Science program that was being explicitly directed towards US researchers. Will the government work with UK institutions to similarly provide a refuge for researchers now based in the US. We're seeing companies like Google, Amazon, Meta, firms with tentacles right through the UK government like KPMG and Deloitte, who are all withdrawing, cancelling, reversing what are known as diversity and equality and inclusion programs. Is the government going to ensure that wherever they operate in the UK, particularly but not solely in the UK government, that British values and British laws on diversity and inclusion are going to be upheld here on our soil? And I also note that the slashing of budgets, and this picks up point made by the Noble Lady Baroness Smith, has had huge impact on global efforts against polio, HIV, malaria, and particularly tuberculosis. Is the British government going to try and pick up the slack? And I note with TB a very great concern about antimicrobial resistance. And finally, and I want to finish by being a little bit positive, there are final plans now being made for 32 coordinated Stand Up for Science rallies across the US and affiliated walkouts and protests around the globe, put together on the initial initiative of 5 early career researchers. Will the Noble Lady, the Minister, join me in supporting that call to stand up for science and agree with me that UK institutions, such as, for example, the Royal Society, should be doing just that?